Hi, I'm Deirdre Dixon Gilbert, your host of Malpractice Diaries, MD. We tell the secrets they keep. Christopher Dunch, a Dallas physician, was stated to have the best bedside manner, the best of education. He was a jet setter and the life of the party. But that is not what his colleagues called him. Dr. Dunch had become a cold-blooded killer. They called him Dr. Death, a nightmare in healthcare.
Imagine you're struggling with back pain for months. No one can tell you what's wrong. Then you find a doctor.
And the words that he said that I wanted to hear was, "I can fix you." And, those are magic words. I was in pain, and somebody, a neurosurgeon, said, "I can fix you."
You trust he'll take care of your problem.
Nothing but good reports and a list of accolades that were 2 pages long.
When you talk to him, he's engaging, he seems very intelligent, he's witty, he's charming.
He'd always talk about, "I'm going to be a doctor."
But he has this dark side that he likes to keep separate and hidden from everybody else.
This is a story about 33 patients who put their trust in a prominent surgeon in Dallas.
State your full name for the record.
Christopher Daniel Dunch.
And wish they hadn't.
This friend called me and said, "I believe that your doctor is on the news that he has been killing patients."
And it's a story about a system that failed to protect them at every possible turn.
I'm trying to stop this guy from being let operate anywhere, anytime, any place.
Have you ever been under the influence of any drugs during the time that you were performing spinal surgery on any patient?
I take the fifth.
It was a total of 38 patients, 31 that they said that was left permanently paralyzed, seriously injured, 2 died. Medical board continued to allow him to practice. There was failure to notify what they call the National Practitioner Data Bank. No records of documented discipline. Drugs and alcohol was a daily routine in the life of this doctor. How was this dangerous doctor allowed to keep practicing? Kay Van Way, the attorney involved in the case, Philip Maxwell and his wife Angela, and Philip, who was one of the victims of the doctor's brutal harm, is joining us today. Welcome, Kay, Philip, and Angela.
Thank you.
Kay, can you please tell us how Dr. Dunch became a licensed physician if he had so many mental health or substance abuse issues?
Well, I'm not sure we'll ever know for sure. The system has many safeguards built into it so that doctors are deemed to be safe and competent and mentally well. But all of the safeguards went out the window in this case. So, for example, it's hard to understand whether Dr. Dunch was a highly competent and mentally sane neurosurgeon when he left Tennessee, and then suddenly when he came to Dallas, he became a horrible surgeon and a very impaired physician. And of course, we know that can't be the case. We know that he had problems in his residency program, and that the reason that doctors go to school and study for so long is so that their superiors can make sure that they have good surgical skills, to make sure that they have their head screwed on straight. But that didn't happen in this case. So despite the fact that Dr. Dunch was known to not be a good surgeon and was known to have mental and addiction problems, he was passed through his residency, given a full license to practice neurosurgery, and he was turned loose on unsuspecting people like Philip and Angela Mayfield.
Wow. Okay, so what is the law that the hospital have, which is their obligation, as you would say, to report these dangerous doctors to medical boards, national practitioner database? What is their obligation?
Hospitals have a legal obligation to police the doctors that are on their staff, so to speak. So if you think about it, a surgeon that doesn't have a hospital to practice at can't hurt anybody. They have to get what's called privileges to practice at a particular hospital. So before putting them on staff, the hospital has to go through a rigorous due diligence vetting process. In addition, after the doctor is put on staff, they're to monitor them against certain metrics and to judge them against their peers. So by way of example, why is Dr. Dunch having so much blood loss in his cases? Why does he have a much higher average than the typical spine surgeon? We might need to look into that. And if there are issues, the hospital has an obligation to conduct an investigation. If a hospital knows a doctor's dangerous, they have an obligation to stop them and prevent them from hurting other people, and to report them to the medical board and also to the National Practitioner Data Bank. The National Practitioner Data Bank is a national repository. It's secret to people like us and to patients. We can't ever find out, but it's a way for medical boards and hospitals to talk to one another so that doctors can't go from state to state, hospital to hospital under the radar, so to speak, so that their track record and their history is available. The problem is, long before Dr. Dunch ever came along, there were problems with hospitals not reporting to the data bank and hospitals skirting the law by just kicking the can down the road, so to speak, instead of reporting the doctors so that they were stopped dead in their tracks, so to speak. And it continues to be a huge problem today.
Okay, so let's take a commercial break. We will be right back.
Medical malpractice is the third leading cause of death in America, but is a well-kept secret. The truth has been hidden for decades, and the medical community would have you believe that there are nothing but frivolous lawsuits destroying their world. There is no such thing as a frivolous lawsuit, but that's the fabricated story being told. 1.5 million people die from medical malpractice a year, and that's a secret. Thousands of medical malpractice suits hidden in a database, botched surgeries, wrong site surgeries, instruments left in bodies, drug and alcohol issues, falsified medical records are all kept secret. Tort reform is what is called, but it has been the secret ingredient to no accountability. Malpractice Diaries, MD, we tell the secrets they keep. No more silence. www.nmmaa.org. Sponsored by the National Medical Malpractice Advocacy Association.
So they called him a monster. And let's watch this video.
All these people have something in common. They went to the same surgeon, a surgeon some are calling a sociopath, and they are telling stories of botched operations that left them with agonizing pain. Now, that surgeon has just been indicted for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. What was that deadly weapon? His surgical tools. Here's Lisa Guerrero's investigation.
They showed up struggling to walk, some limping, some using canes, and others unable to walk at all. These 9 people are speaking out to Inside Edition about the man they say ruined their lives.
He's a monster. drug addict, a psychopath,
killer. And they're not talking about a hardened criminal. They're talking about a neurosurgeon.
Our next best doctor, it's neurosurgeon Dr. Christopher Dunch.
In commercials, Dr. Christopher Dunch calls himself the best neurosurgeon in all of Dallas. He specializes in relieving back and neck pain.
Then they come back to me to discuss surgical options.
But these folks couldn't disagree more. They say he's a butcher and a drug addict who maimed them during surgery.
It feels like somebody has an ice pick planted squarely in my back.
Lee Passmore says he never had crippling nerve spasms until Dr. Dunch needlessly removed part of his spine during a procedure to relieve back pain.
I shouldn't be this way. I'm sorry.
According to Passmore's attorney, Dr. Dunch had a serious drug problem since he was a resident.
There is one report that he spent an entire night doing cocaine at a party, and then when the sun came up, put on his scrubs and went off to the hospital to treat children.
Philip, I'm coming to you now because you were one of the victims that was a part of this 38 people. And I'm probably sure that there probably was more than 38, but this is the 38 that was involved in the case that Kay and you all were in. Can you explain how you became a victim of that doctor?
Excuse me. I became a victim of Christopher Dunch because I need to have a herniated disc decompressed in my cervical spine and the C6, C7 level. I had done multiple surgeries with different neurosurgeons, and he came highly recommended through various hospitals in the Dallas area, and through me vetting different neurosurgeons, whether it be online searches, I even checked the medical board, for every doctor that I searched for to see if they have any records. And there was nothing on Christopher Dunch at that time that was visible for the public to see, even though the medical board did have complaints filed against him, but it's not public. And so upon making contact with Christopher Dunch and explaining to him my situation, I made a visit, and I went to that visit. He was extremely knowledgeable, in his field. I can say that there wasn't any, red flags, I should say, that would, say he doesn't know what he's doing. And he, explained to me that he had, done, thousands of, the procedures that I needed for the decompression in the cervical spine.
Mm-hmm.
And so upon having a couple more visits, and I had the pre-surgery, examination, and I scheduled the surgery.
So, Angela, the day that you took him to the hospital, I know that you expected to have a great surgery. You all seem to have met with the doctor. What was it like in the waiting room for you? And what did you find out during the process?
Upon the time that Philip had gone to the back for the procedure, we had already prayed. We knew, that everything was well. And so as I was sitting out there in the lobby, and because Dr. Dunch had assured us that it would only take 30 to 45 minutes for us, for him to come out of the surgery, go into recovery, that it would be such a, short surgery. But then after 45 minutes, after an hour passed, I become really concerned, as in that something might have gone wrong. So then I reached out to the nurses, and they said that someone would be reaching out to me to give me an update. And so again, time passed, and I had not heard anything from them. And then so after, can't recall how long it had been, but it was more than 45 minutes or an hour that he was back there. And for me to just sit there just anticipating and trying to figure out what had happened. This wasn't a quick surgery. It was hours that he was back there.
So he comes out in what? They take him to an ICU, to a regular room. I mean, where do he go from there? And when you walked in whatever room he was in, I mean, what is it that you actually saw?
Well, after a time, the nurse finally came out and asked if I want, to come go with her to where he was in supposed to be recovery. So when I got back there, Philip wasn't being very responsive. Uh, Blood pressure was dropping, and I'm trying to figure out why was the nurses scrambling around trying to figure out what was going on, because when they came over to do the routine, touching, to see if he's ready to go be discharged, because that's what they had told us, that that he was getting ready to be discharged. And just to come find out, as they were doing the prick test and touching his feet, he wasn't able to move anything. And the doctor had already gone, because he had already assured me that everything had gone well, that he'll be back up to his norm, within a couple of weeks, give it, some more weeks, maybe a month. He'll be full, where he needs to be. And so based on that, when I got to connect, the doctor was gone. It was the complete opposite. We didn't see Philip laying there in the bed, coming out of what we call the anesthesia, responding, but he wasn't. He was just laying there. And the nurses are pressing the drip back, trying to get his blood pressure back up. And then that's when they started making phone calls to Dr. Dunce to see if they could get him to come back and evaluate him again.
So he actually left the hospital.
Yes,
So
he had already left.
Kay, how did you actually meet up with the family, Mayfield here, this family and the rest? Do you know like a time frame maybe?
I can't. By the time I met Philip, I had already had other clients of Dr. Dunch's, so I knew about Dr. Dunch by the time that I met Philip for the first time. And I remember meeting you, Philip, as if it was yesterday. And I don't remember if you were with your brother or your brother-in-law or somebody, but
Yeah.
I definitely remember meeting you. And of course, as an aside, that I will never forget you. And lawyers aren't supposed to play favorites, but you'll always be one of my favorites. And you and Angela will always be in my heart forever. And I can tell you that I've seen a lot of seriously injured people over the 30 some odd years of my career. But just because Philip is sitting there, he looks great. He's talking, he's sitting up. He's hurt really, really, really bad. And it was the kind of injury to his spinal cord that left other doctors just scratching their heads, just saying, how could this even happen to him?
So I'm wanting to know, because I do know that this is sort of like a problem. Were you all able to do a background check on this doctor? Did you know him prior to the surgery? I did hear you say that he came highly recommended. And that's a key word, because looking at this particular subject and looking at this case, many of the clients actually stated that he was highly recommended. He was had a very great bedside manner. You would probably never known that he was who they said he was. So did you all know him prior to this surgery? Were you able to do a background check? And when I ask that, I'm asking that because it's very important for the audience to understand sometimes that I believe you said you looked on the Texas Medical Board and there were a few things.
Well, actually, on the Texas Medical Board, there was nothing on Christopher Lance.
Okay.
But actually coming to find out afterwards that they had complaints on him. But the two major hospitals here in Dallas that he worked at, he was highly recommended on their websites, and that's where I found him from.
So you just found him on the website.
Yeah.
And it stated, and there was nothing on the Texas Medical Board website, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Kay, you mentioned that about the National Practitioner Data Bank.
Well, by the time Philip got to Dr. Dunch, he had already killed 2 of his patients, had made 1 a quadriplegic, had already operated on 1 person and left, put the spinal hardware not even in their spine. He was so disoriented, and he had already been, run off, so to speak, from 2 prior hospitals. But this is a huge patient safety issue because none of us on this call are different from one another in the sense that I don't have any special powers to find out about my own doctors or the doctors that my family go to. And even during the time that we had these active, serious lawsuits against Dr. Dunch, if you hadn't been watching the local news or reading the local newspaper and you just went online, boy, you would think he was the best thing since sliced bread. I mean, he had 5-star ratings, and, hospitals want to market the doctors. They hire marketing teams. They put out these slick looking videos, and you can't tell whether that really is a legitimate review of the doctor or whether this is just marketing. So, and we as patients are not entitled to find out information if there's a pending investigation by the medical board. If the doctor had 10 complaints against them in the data bank, that's all private to the patient. Patient will never know. If the doctor has been investigated by the hospital, you would never know it. So this is an enormous problem. We need much more transparency in patient safety as far as I'm concerned, because let's face it, I mean, doctors are just like the rest of us. They put their pants on 1 leg at a time in the morning, just like we do. And similarly, doctors, like the rest of the population, do suffer from depression and alcoholism and drug addiction. But there's a kind of a secret, let's protect the doctors at all cost mentality.
And that doesn't sound very good because, again, that's it's pretty hard for someone, like you said, you're out there searching on the site, looking for some answers. And sometimes you don't have even the time. Sometimes it's an emergency. It could make it even worse because you just don't know. Okay, what is the law, though, that's on a patient's rights to sue this hospital or any hospital for putting a dangerous doctor on staff, and better yet, keeping that doctor on staff knowing that this doctor has caused harm?
Well, this is what my dad would call adding insult to injury. So the law in the state of Texas is horrible. So when you think of most lawsuits, you think in terms of negligence. But when it comes to holding hospitals responsible for putting dangerous doctors on staff or keeping dangerous doctors on staff, it's a malice standard, meaning you have to prove that the hospital knew that this doctor was dangerous, knew that they were likely to harm the very next patient that was wheeled into the operating room, and they did nothing about it. And it's a very almost impossible standard to prove malice or what their intent was. As well, all of the information that we would need to be able to meet that very high legal threshold is secret to patients. So what the hospital knew, when they knew it, what they did about it, all secret. So the Texas Supreme Court, at the time that they handed down these decisions, didn't say there is no cause of action in Texas for credentialing mistakes or credentialing negligence. They said it's a malice standard. We know it's difficult, but what I'd like to say, and what all of my colleagues would probably say, is it's practically an impossible standard. And this is something that absolutely has got to be changed in the law is that you can't let hospitals self-regulate themselves. They have, and I'm not saying that all hospitals are bad, but they have a profit motive. Keeping a neurosurgeon on staff is very profitable for them. And yet we're saying you can do all of your business in secret. And if you make a mistake that hurts somebody really badly, we're going to basically take away the rights that they have to hold you responsible. Oh, and by the way, if you meet all those hurdles and you get past all of that, there's a cap on damages. So I say hospitals are almost self-regulating in this area.
This is a question, Kay, that I want to know because this was a unique case. And as Philip sort of spoke in the beginning, he said, even with the harm that he had suffered, nobody wanted to take this case.
Right.
With 38 patients, either harmed, paralyzed, or dead, with medical boards knowing what's going on, this man was still allowed to practice medicine, jumping from one hospital to the next and reading stories. I know that his colleagues were complaining as well, trying to get him out of the medical field in some way. I want to know, it wasn't the harm that actually got him out of there, because we know that, right? Because he had all these cases against him, and it wasn't the harm that did it. What actually brought him to justice? And I'm looking for something for you to say, and I'll tell you if you don't make that answer. But what was it that actually brought him to justice? Because it wasn't the evidence. It wasn't the evidence. You know what I'm saying? And I'm talking about the people who you could actually see the harm with. So what brought him to justice?
Well, I would like to say that a couple of things super quick. Not all of those 38 patients came forward, hired a lawyer, participated in the lawsuit. The reason that more than 38 patients weren't harmed is because Dr. Dunch was a new surgeon and was just building his business. If he had had more patients and more business, more people would have been hurt. But what I think was good about what we did is that it was a collaboration to bring him to justice between the patients who had enough to deal with, dealing with their injuries, to also deal with a lawsuit, which is not fun, and to have to deal with people like me and the opposing lawyers and deal with all that. But also we had doctors from the medical community. And we had a couple of doctors in particular, Dr. Henderson and Dr. Kirby, who were willing to go to bat and, put themselves out there. And they were calling the medical board. They and lawyers were calling some of these hospitals saying, do you realize who this guy is? You've got to stop him immediately. But ultimately, it was the bravery of a young to me, I should say, prosecutor who was willing to step out of her comfort zone. Prosecutors are accustomed to prosecuting burglaries and carjackings and things like that. And she stepped out of her comfort zone. And I don't think any of us thought that it would result in a life sentence. I mean, doctors just aren't prosecuted. They do tend to get special treatment in our system. Mm-hmm. And I just don't think any of us thought that a jury was going to send him to prison for the rest of his life.
So there was a word or something, there was an email that he sent, because even though, and this is where I'm trying to get to, because it's the malice that you were talking about. And then the only way that you can get that is the doctor has to say it, right? He or she has to actually say, I did this. Otherwise, we already saw that the cases really didn't matter. What did he say? Because he said something that literally helped your case.
Well, like normally, most doctors have themselves together enough to be able to be prepped by their lawyers and keep it together when they're under oath or whatever. But Dr. Dunch couldn't control himself from even sending me late night emails and sending others late night emails. And so we were able to get some of his emails where he was saying things like, I can't remember it off the top of my head. Philip or Angela might remember, but he was the
cold-blooded killer.
Yes. A cold-blooded killer.
Yeah.
Right. And he's sending these things out to whoever during the time that he is doing drugs and alcohol. So let's go, because we're almost to the end. Kay, do you think anything has actually changed as a result of this case?
Well, I don't. And I want to put this into perspective, because this is not the first cocaine addicted spine surgeon case I've ever had. A decade before the Dr. Dunch cases, I handled about 10 cases on behalf of patients that were severely injured by a cocaine addicted spine surgeon. And I know for a fact that nothing has changed. What I'm hopeful about and what I'm passionate about and spending my energy on these days is trying to keep the story alive, because I think when people hear the story and they understand that this wasn't just one in a million crazy doctor, that the ecosystem, the environment, the setup of the healthcare system created this situation, and the situation is ripe for another doctor like this to come along, and we've just got to stop that from happening.
Well, I want to say thank you, Philip, Angela, and Kay, for joining us today. I'm hoping as well that, there is going to be some change. I believe the stories must be told. And that's the reason for this type of platform, is to keep those stories going, because the more stories we have, I believe that people can start understanding that this is a very serious issue, because there should be something done for doctors who are allowed to continue to practice medicine over and over again and harming patients. And it's not right for people not to even know that these doctors are actually having problems in the first place. I believe if we know, you would not go see these physicians. And it's very unfair that the entire world, as you say, is subjected to this stuff. It doesn't matter. You're an attorney. I'm not sure what Philip did before he was harmed, and Angela, but I know that they had a different life than they do now, as well as so many other people. So it's a dangerous situation out there, and we are going to look for some change. Again, I just thank you for coming on, and again, thank you, and we'll talk soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Take care.
Thank you. You too. Thanks for tuning in to Malpractice Diaries MD. We tell the stories, they keep. Please make sure that you tune in next week, same time, same station, same Facebook page, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And we look forward to seeing you next week. See you soon.